And today is Labor Day weekend, right? So it's a special one. Is reserved or planned at least for guest speakers, guest teachers, amongst whom are the students who are training with me, so they have an opportunity to practice, teach, and the Sangha community has an opportunity to hear a different voice once in a while. I think it's pretty traditional for the guiding teacher to do most of the talking. Most Zen centers you go to, I think you find that senior person gives most of the talks. And here we recognized early on that this would be a good training opportunity. And it's usually done formally during an onward, like a 90-day period where the person who is shusho or head student is going through a 90-day period as part of their formal practice path. And they do what is called practice teaching, meaning under supervision. So today is Shinjin, Michael Goldman. Shinjin means, Dharma name means?
Deep mountain.
Deep mountain. Appropriate. We'll be giving a talk on why we wear what we wear. All right?
Yeah.
And I took my formal case off because it was so hot. I told Mike he could also talk about why we don't wear what we don't wear. Right. Very zen. So with that, I turn it over to Shinjin, Michael Goldman.
Thank you. Yeah, one thing, the formal robes, wearing those robes is, you probably saw Sensei bowing. It's about like wrestling with a squid the entire time you've got them on, and they do get very, very hot. So we opted to use the informal case of today, giving this talk. I got the idea for this talk, and please keep in mind this is not a reprimand of any sort. Not calling anyone out or anything like that, but I got the idea for this talk a couple of weeks ago. Well, it was actually 2 months ago now. We initiated, I think, 8 initiate monks in the initiation ceremony, and I looked out at all of them, and I noticed not a single one of them was wearing black. I thought that was really interesting. And so what is the traditional color of Soto Zen? Black. You know, and so I was like, this is worth talking about, worth thinking about what's happening here. What does this mean? So I wanted to talk about why we wear what we're wearing, or what is the idea behind this black color. And when you research it, a couple of things come to mind. One of the first things is, obviously the origin of the robes was a section of land was deeded to the Buddha and his followers, and the nobleman that deeded this land went to the Buddha and says, "I'm going to need to know how to tell your followers from anybody else that maybe walking through here or living on this land." So that's when they developed the traditional robes. There was also really strict rules what kind of cloth you could make these robes out of. It had to be cloth that somebody else discarded. It couldn't be store-bought. It had to be begged for. And keep in mind, this was a mendicant order, and everything they had was begged for. So you can find some references that talk about the cloth had to be, there was a list of things that the cloth had to be, and it included things like gnawed on by oxen, chewed by mice, slept in by vermin, I mean, these were all acceptable kinds of cloth. It was basically stuff that somebody else had cast off. The color, from what I was able to gather researching this, was one of the original ideas of the color, since these guys did not own very many pieces of clothing. They owned their robes, and that was pretty much it. They dyed it to match the local dirt, so they wouldn't have to wash it very often. So if you look at the geology of most parts of Asia, Japan is primarily a volcanic soil, so it's very, very dark. So you would dye it black. If you were in Thailand, or Cambodia, these areas that were part of the delta of the Mekong River, it's more alluvial silt, so it's going to be more yellowish in color. You go north into Tibet, where the rock is all granite, they have the dark purple robes. So, that was one theory, was that it was to match the local geology. One of the other ideas that I came across was that the dark colors that we wear in Soto Zen are meant so that we don't distract anybody else that's sitting. But then you have to beg the question, if we're all facing the wall, who are we distracting? But I did one project in here one time, a long time ago for graduate school, where you were supposed to observe a group of people and write down everything that happened over a period of time. So I observed a sitting period, and you would be amazed how much movement there is in the room. You know, so we're loaded with distractions in here, you know, and people wearing bright colors and moving around and coughing, sneezing, farting, everything else you would imagine they're going to do. So, you know, so that really calls into question, are we really distracting anybody by not wearing black? But one of the ideas that I thought of was, you know, in this room, we don't do what we do in the rest of our lives. You know, so the idea that that a uniform changes your mindset when you've got it on and when you're in this room. I mean, you know, granted, we do learn a skill that we can take into every aspect of our lives by learning how to sit. But in this room, we don't behave the way that we behave every place else. So that was one of the ideas that I thought of, is that maybe this idea of this uniform is to designate an activity, formalize an activity. When we have this on, when we're in here, this is the way we're going to behave. We may learn something we take outside, but this room becomes a different space, and it becomes a different space by the uniform we're required to wear. On the other hand, you know, we are a lay community, and we have lives outside of here. This isn't a monastery. You know, we don't live here as well as do this work. So, you know, it's entirely possible, and all of us have been in this situation where we come here for Sunday for the service, and then we have some other obligation, lunch with friends, you know, whatever it may be. You know, so we're probably not gonna go back someplace and change clothes. We may just leave from here with what we've got on. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I don't know how many times I've been to lunch with Sensei, both of us dressed exactly like this. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, probably everybody in this room, we've gone up the street, up the hill to Taiun or down the road to American Roadhouse, and, you know, we're dressed like Zen monks, and everybody, you know, raises their eyebrows, and, you know, perfectly normal to those of us that do it. One morning I was on my way in here, and I stopped at the convenience store, and this is what I had on, and the woman behind the counter goes, "Are you a ninja?" And, you know, not being in the frame of mind right then to go into the details of what Soto Zen was, I just looked at her and said, "Yeah, more or less." So, you know, I thought of this concept here of a uniform. So, one of the things that a couple of examples I thought of. So, you know, do we use the clothing to define and refine our activities in here and make them different? And if we are going to do that, then what is acceptable? You know, because you see a really wide variety of what people wear. I mean, I've had this gi for close to 20 years. I bought it when I took my initiate vows, and it's really the only thing I wear in here. That's just me. Your mileage may vary. How you do this may be totally different, but a couple of things that, you know, two very influential Zen teachers that wouldn't even go in the monastery, Basui and Hanshan, that lived in a cave. You know, you can guarantee they weren't looking too sharp. You know, they were wearing rags. And, you know, Hui Nong, when he wasn't even in the monastery when he was enlightened, he was walking past carrying a load of wood and heard the Diamond Cutter Sutra. He wasn't dressed out in robes either. So maybe the clothing is not the important thing. Maybe that's not the salient point. You know, one of the notes that I made here, even though, you know, may or may not be exactly relevant, I said, you know, Jimi Hendrix is still going to sound like Jimi Hendrix regardless of what he was wearing. You know, that's one point. You know, if enlightenment is going to happen, if your practice is going to be for real, that's going to happen regardless of what you've got on. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, you know, uniforms exist for a reason. You know, you're not going to show up for somebody else's wedding wearing a hazmat suit. You know, people might, but, you know, I wouldn't recommend it, you know. And the other note I made, you wouldn't show up for a judo tournament in a rabbit suit, you know. It just, so.
Unless you're really good.
Unless you're really good. Yeah. I mean, you're throwing down a gauntlet. So, you know, this is kind of, you know, on one hand, you know, so it's the kind of question I think we get to figure out as a lay community. You know, what do we want to, you know, do we want to impose a dress code? And do we want to put people in a position where somebody shows up wearing something we think is inappropriate, saying, no, go home and change? I don't think that's really going to gain us any traction. But, you know, I think that, that there are traditions that are worth upholding. And this kind of brings us to a bigger question. One of the things that Sensei quotes many times that his teacher Matsuoka said, the founder of our lineage, the future of Zen is in America. So what does that mean with some of these traditions? Because obviously we're not Japanese. I mean, we have one Japanese member. She's not in the room right now, but you know how she would look at this, I think maybe a little different. But you know, this isn't Japan. So, okay, the first option is, okay, well, why don't we just take all of our clothes and match the local dirt? We'll come in here looking like red clay and gray granite. You know, that's an option, but maybe not that great of one. But I think the big picture, there's almost two ways to look at this. You know, in this room we train, and when we train, we bring all the attendant rigor with it, and that may include a certain uniform, a certain set of dress that is acceptable. Or, on the other hand, and this I think would be a much more American way of looking at it, would be, is this something that we incorporate into the rest of our lives so that the clothing from the Zendo is also appropriate for what we wear anyplace else? So example, if you were going from here to a cookout, you didn't change clothes. So I think there's a couple of ways to look at this, and I think it kind of brings in this bigger question is, as Americans, what are we going to bring to Zen? I think on one hand, we have the opportunity to bring the best of what we are, you know, Thomas Jefferson, FDR, Miles Davis. On the other hand, we've got the opportunity to bring the worst of what we are, Kim Kardashian and Donald Trump. You know, so without being pedantic about it, my own opinion is I do think it's important that we make our activities in this room different from the rest of our lives, because what we're doing here is training. What we're doing here is amassing a certain skill, and I think that there should be some veneration involved in that. But once again, that's just my opinion, and so what I thought I would do was throw this out to the floor and see what you guys think. And you know, I picked an interesting day to do this, not that many here, but most of us are adhering to the dress code to a certain extent. You know, we're all wearing dark colors, and see what you guys thought about all that.
Mike, times have changed. Just when I think about my dad going to work, he always put on a tie and a suit. And though he wasn't required to do that, he did it. And then when he got into the lab, he put on his white coat and you know, instead of black. And then at the end of the day, take the white coat off and go home and change it to something more regular. When I sort of in my initial jobs, one being in Washington, D.C. at Fannie Mae, practically no one wore a suit except for perhaps the very, very top guys. I mean, like the president and so forth. Everybody was in casual clothes. Here at the Federal Reserve Bank in Atlanta, they had blue jean Fridays. So things have changed. I just want to point that out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it, you know, the 30 plus years that I've been in the workforce, I've seen that change too. I think when I started, you know, nobody wore jeans to the office, and now I don't wear anything else.
It's almost as, in some cases, if you wear a suit and tie, you're kind of suspect.
Yeah.
Slickster, meister.
I'm pretty grateful that, you know, we've Americanized some parts of the worship or service, that's it, the service that we have. For instance, the translation of the Heart Sutra. You know, it's nice to be able to chant that in English. But also, I think that I recall, I think in the Shobo Genzo, I think that's where it's at. I think Dogen talks about wearing the robes and the connection that he has with the Buddha. And also, you know, Sensei, for instance, receives the Dharma transmission. So I think there's something to carry over, to not completely get rid of, just to Americanize it. And I was watching on YouTube Shahaku Okamura talking about Americanization of Zen, and he was saying that he's also likes it moving, Americanizing, but also hoping that we keep some of the Japanese traditions with it, you know, not to move so quickly with it.
There's a symbolism in the black that I've heard of. In the East, black is the color of life. Here it's the color of death. White, conversely, is the color of death. In the East, they wear white for funerals and so on. Here, white is the color of life. So it's kind of like a... So the dark, the black, represents, sometimes said to represent the muck and mire bottom of the pond out of which the lotus grows. The lotus blossom growing is a symbol of our Zen life. It's in the muck and mire. They've tried to transplant them into the clean dirt of the valleys. They won't grow. They gradually move through the water of the pond. It's very murky at the bottom, and gradually gets clearer and clearer until finally, once they break the surface and come up into the sunlight, that's when they bloom. So it's a nice poetic metaphor. This is why we have the lotus blossoms on sculptures on the altars that represents these various stages of development. Buddha, when he was resolving whether or not he had anything to teach, you know, from his experience, reasoned that all people must be like the lotus blossom in different stages. And so some may be ready to hear, you know, what he had to say, just as some lotus blossoms are ready to bloom because they've broken the water, and, right? So the black is symbolic of that, as I understand. That's kind of the muck and mire of our ignorance, you might say, the layers of mud that we're in from our own baggage that we carry with us. And clarifying that the turbidity, it's called turbidity, an old ancient metaphor that Buddha gave, which Thich Nhat Hanh later repeated in one of his books, is a jar of water which is murky, right, full of silt on the shelf. If you leave it alone, gradually the silt will settle to the bottom. You can see through the water. But if you keep picking it up and shaking it, then it stays murky and turbid. You can't see through it. So this is a metaphor for Zazen. If we sit, the silt settles, right? And we become clear. We can see.
Yeah, I kind of enjoy the lack of thought that has to go around the dress code too. By having just something in place, it allows me not to have to spend any energy thinking about what I'm going to wear or what I'm going to put on. And I think that simplicity really carries over nicely, especially on like long retreats. It allows me just to kind of just get dressed, not having to worry about matching or looking a certain way or combining outfits.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I have 2 of these and they hang on a peg on the inside of my closet. I never have to think about that. But, you know, and it happens more when you wear the formal robes. I mean, you know, definitely something happens once you've got those on, you know, inside your psychology. You're definitely in a different place when you have on your formal robes. And I think some of that comes through the body. You can't move the way you normally move when you're wearing that stuff. You know, your movements have to be a lot slower, a lot more deliberate, and you have to be paying attention because this thing is constantly sliding. So there's that. But you know, I think these uniforms really do change our psychology. I mean, you know, I don't think you're the same person in some ways on the way to the gym that you are when you're dressed up and doing something formal. You know?
It's a bit of theater, isn't it, where you put on a costume and you go on stage and you play Hamlet or something.
Right.
It changes your... it's also true, what Robert was saying, I think, that we wear the robes for others, we don't really wear them for ourselves. I mean, they do have a teleologic feedback effect on you, definitely. But that's not really the reason we wear them. I would prefer not to wear the robes in most situations. But they represent the juban and the kimono represent Japan. And the koromo, this robe, represents China. And the outer robe represents India, the blanket-like robe I was wearing during the service. So this is a miniature miniaturization of that big outer robe. It has the same number of panels and so forth. And it's got a handy halter, you know, so you can wear it around your neck. So we think this came from China. I'm not sure if we tried to say, well, let's get rid of the Chinese stuff and not the Japanese, we wouldn't be able to figure out what's Chinese and not Japanese and so forth, or Indian. So when you're fully enrobed, you're really wearing the symbols of the countries of origin. Major ones: India, China, Japan, Korea, of course, and the Far East. But so it does have that sense of tradition about it, I guess like a military uniform. Probably carries a lot of that. But we should all understand that, again, we don't wear the robes for ourselves. We wear them for others. People coming here expect you to not be in a cat in a hat suit or present Zen in a respectful way. And that's the image. So psychologically, that clicks in the mind of the community or audience as well, right? And we should understand, though, the symbolism goes beyond that. The symbol, the robe, all of these are pointing at what's called the Dharmakaya, or the essence body. We have the Namanikaya, the transformation body, the Dharmakaya, which is the essence body, which is not limited to this body, and the Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body. Not exactly like Father, Son, Holy Ghost, not like the Trinity, but the robe is symbolizing that original body. So even in your birthday suit, you're still in the robe, so to speak. Dr. Nipper has
So it's interesting, your observation with the new initiate, or the new initiates, that there was sort of a lack of, connection apparently with the, symbolism. Because at a certain point in the past, when I was here practicing prior, my impression was there was almost like an over attachment to the dress and the costume, if you will. And so it's interesting to see how it seems to go in cycles and wax and wane a little bit. And so for me, it's a bit of it's almost like a paradox or a koan, in that like there's this potential to get too embodied in and then also to just go, oh, the heck with it,
I really love that you brought that up, because that's one of the things that occurred to me. It's like, I saw nobody's wearing black, and I said something to Sensei. I was like, do you realize they're not wearing black? And Sensei said, so? So I was like, okay, so what may be going on here is that I'm just attached to what the Sangha looked like when I first started. It was a lot more serious about the dress, and so yeah, I mean, I really like that because that's one of the things that prompted me to want to talk about this. It's like, okay, what am I attaching to? And just because I'm, a couple of keys, does that mean that everybody needs to?
Sorry, just thinking about something related to that. So I started out in elementary school in Paris, France, all boys school. Very tough. You got beaten up every day. If you didn't beat somebody up yourself, eventually you learned how to do that. The teachers were very harsh. They could whack you. And so you sat straight and you lifted your little chalkboard when she would ask you questions. Everybody in the class would, and you would behave. And then we left Paris to come to Rochester, New York. My dad had gotten this next job. And started the end of the first grade and the rest of my life in this country. And all of a sudden it was like, in school, okay? The kids were relaxed. But when I went in there first, I was like this, okay? And in anticipation of being beaten up, I beat somebody up, so I was a hooligan. And so it's in some sense, if you start with black and everything, you're much more prone to stay that way. Mm-hmm. But if you start with this relaxed attitude, it's very tough to go back to being wearing black.
Yeah.
Proper, in quotes.
Proper. Yeah.
You notice that around here, you see people come in for the first time and they're in some relatively garish outfit. Next time, maybe a little toned down, and eventually, if they keep coming back, they start showing up without anybody saying anything. So we're nonconformists in society because how many, we're still in the 1% all other column, right? So when we come to Zen, we can afford to conform. And it has that, in Zen at least, it has that implication that you are willing to surrender your ego, right, or your self-expression, right, for the benefit of the group, for the benefit of. So I think it's like a fundamental kind of level of why there would ever be any conformity anyway, right? It's sort of a genuine level of conforming, I think. It's for the sake of the Sangha, or the sake of harmony in the community. You don't try to stand out too much. And it is a Japanese thing. The nail that stands out will be driven out. Right? But from our perspective, I think in America, this practice of Zen is kind of the opposite of that kind of conformity. Is the beginning of creativity. It's a way of tapping into our innate creativity.
Yeah, and I think the people that, when you talk about creativity versus conformity and what we do here, the people that are the best at being non-conformist, the people that are best at breaking rules are the people that put in the effort to master them in the first place.
If you don't know what the rules are, you don't know how to break them.
How to break them. Yeah.
It's a martial arts concept too.
And I came to Zen through the martial arts. In judo, you show up to class and there's only 2 colors of gi that are acceptable, and that's what you're going to wear, and everybody has the same kind of gi on, or else you're going to be sent home. It's expected that your gi is clean, and, it's either blue or it's white, and that's it. I think I've got this one friend that wanted to get fired from his job. So he showed up. One morning he showed up wearing nothing but an inner tube and chains. And he was fired on the spot. So, you didn't. No, I swear, he had this inner tube around his waist and he had chains on.
That would be all fine at certain jobs.
Yeah, certain jobs that would be. He was a cook, and you know,
You're fine to get rid of the inner tube.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, we can definitely make a statement.
Was it the inner tube or the chains?
I don't know. I was too busy laughing. I think I wanted to close that. My girlfriend just got me this shirt, so we're on the subject of Americanization of Zen. I just thought I would wear this and show it today. So, yeah, she gave me that for my birthday, and I was like, I think there's kind of a process of work here you may not really get, but thanks for the shirt.
Is that a Brad Warner thing?
Yeah, it kind of looks like it looks like a Brad Warner thing. All right, well that's all I had today. You know, we got a beautiful holiday weekend out there. Sometimes I think the best thing we can do to serve the Dharma is be outside doing the things we want to do. So, anybody have any closing
Clothing.
comments? Anybody have any clothing comments? Well played. Well played. Okay, well thank you very much. See you next week.